Good days. Today I'm going to talk about how to write an argumentative essay. Here are the objectives for today's lesson. Determine the purpose and structure of an argumentative essay formulated with thesis statement and critique a sample argumentative essay. Now, what is an argumentative essay? It represents the writer's stance or viewpoint on a particular issue, and it entails outlining arguments and proposing a course of action. It's really quite difficult to write an argumentative essay if you're not familiar with the issue. Therefore, as a writer, you have to be knowledgeable of the topic or issue that you will write about, and you should back up your argument or arguments with sufficient evidence from credible sources. So, like an ordinary essay, argumentative essay has also three parts: the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. For the introduction, you need to present the issue and use hook techniques or attention grabbing statements so that your readers will be encouraged to read your essay. Next, you need to define the issue and discuss the background, provide background information about that particular issue. For instance, if you are talking about the importance of native language in learning the second language, then you really have to ground your argument with sufficient evidence from research. Next one, you have to present your stand or your position through your thesis statement. And for the body paragraphs, you have to state your main arguments, provide sufficient evidence for each argument, like um, presenting statistical data, experts' testimonies, and others. You also need to provide counter arguments or possible weaknesses of your arguments. And of course, for the conclusion, you need to restate your thesis statement. Let me just discuss with you how to write a thesis statement in argumentation. You can use although because statement as given here. Although the powerful American Medical Association has so far refused to recognize the usefulness of alternative medical techniques such as acupuncture, I believe that acupuncture should become an accepted part of the mainstream medical profession because thousands of years of practice by highly trained personnel has demonstrated its success in healing some medical problems. Now, as you notice, the statement begins with although, and it talks about um, the American Medical Association's refusal to recognize the usefulness of alternative medical techniques, which is acupuncture. And then, but the position of the writer is that she believes that acupuncture should become an accepted part. Why? Because thousands of years of practice by highly trained personnel has demonstrated its success in healing some medical problems. So that's the reason. And all right, so there you go. This is one example of a thesis statement, and here is another example. The issue is, should we allow OFWs to work for a longer period abroad? And this thesis statement following the although because format is stated this way. Although overseas Filipino workers can uplift the financial conditions of their families and can contribute to the country's GNP as well, it's not advisable to allow these OFWs to work abroad for a longer period because it may result in broken homes, which will have tremendous effect on the children's future. So there. Now, how do we refute the counter arguments? So we have to consider the two sides of the coin when you are arguing on a particular issue, the pro and the counter arguments. We call it the advantages let's say, of allowing the OFWs to work abroad, and the counter arguments is no, they should not be allowed to work there for a long period of time because it will result in broken homes, which will have an impact on their children's future. So here are the examples of how to refute the counter arguments. Opponents of this position argue that another arguments against X is that. So these are the examples. And then after each opposing viewpoint, student writers must refute that counter argument. And you have to consider the following transitions, like the use of however, in contrast, although, even though, despite, or ends, and spiral. So these are just ways in how to refute the counter argument, which we'll have a sample later on. And since we're talking about an argumentative essay, it's very important that you know how to organize that particular essay. Here are the parts. Start with the introduction. The introduction should consist of a thesis statement. And the second one, you should provide the background information about the issue. Third, pro arguments. Pro argument refers to the advantages, or if we're talking about the OFD, if you're talking about the governments allowing of OFWs to work for a longer period of time abroad, then you have to consider the weakest argument, moving on to the strongest argument for argument three, and to counter that, meaning this one is a counter argument or refutation. You have to state that after mentioning all the three pro arguments. And then the last one is the conclusion, which summarizes your main points, and of course recommendation, or which usually is in the solution or recommendation for action. For example, here is another topic, which is about the development of solar energy systems. And the thesis statement goes this way: although solar energy systems are initially costly and have been inefficient, we need to develop solar energy because the source is free and inexhaustible, safe, and needs only simple technology. This is the outline. First, you have to talk about how the energy problem, develops. So you have to explain that and provide background information about the different sources of energy that we're using. And we have pro argument one. So you have to consider the advantage, the first advantage. Resource of sun is free, plentiful, and inexhaustible. And the pro argument two, resource of the sun is safe and non-polluting. And the third one, which is the strongest argument, systems are built using simple technology. And for the counter argument paragraph, you may talk about the costs and efficiency, short versus long-term costs and efficiency. Initial investment is high, but eventually much less expensive. And you have research will continue to increase efficiency. So in other words, in this particular part or section of your argumentative essay, you have to consider the disadvantage of using solar energy. Well, the initial investment is high, so you have there, but consider its long-term benefit. It may be a high investment at first, but eventually it will cost less, because if you have already purchased all the necessary equipment to put up solar energy, I mean, to use solar energy in your own home, then once it is already built up, you will spend less anymore on energy. So consider the long-term benefit. So that's the counter argument for the this is to refute the disadvantage of using solar energy that is expensive. And then you have letter C, research will continue to increase efficiency. Then you have to back it up with whatever findings you can find, whatever studies you can find rather, regarding the positive um, effect of using solar energy or the benefits of using energy. Is it efficient really according to research? All right. Next, to conclude your essay, you have to summarize all the main points. If you have three main points covered, you summarize them all and provide the recommendation. These are some of the hook techniques or the introductory sentences so that you can grab your reader's attention. Of course, you can think of a startling statement that will make your readers think, that will make them wonder. Second one, you can ask a rhetorical question, a question with an answer. Like, should the Philippines resort to solar energy? Just like that. And you can tell a story. And then quotation, a line from a source, which is about the topic of definitely. And in gathering information for or evidence for your arguments, you have to consider this types of evidence: logic, ethics, and emotions. Then from the word logic, it means logos, and this is the science of correct thinking. And these are the pieces of evidence that you can use to support your argument. So the first, we have the use of facts, statistics, and expert testimony. That's for logic. This is an example of fact. On Wednesday afternoon, a bus rammed into a flyover along EDSA, and the passenger said that the driver was texting while driving. So if the contention is not to allow the drivers to use cell phone while driving, then you can have this as an evidence. This is an accident that happened in 2012, but you can also get, of course, the most recent facts or the data from 2022 newspaper. Next, this is another example of logical appeal. So using logic to support your evidence. Aside from fact, you can also use statistics. Like, according to the International Labor Organization, about 5.5 million children are engaged in child labor, and 3 million of them are tied in the worst forms of labor, according to Torres. So you have there the resources. The Philippines posted 7.2 economic growth in 2013, Rappler top 2014. No? For this to statistical data, you have the resources from Torres and Rappler. For the third logical appeal, you can use experts' testimony, like reading a research article done by scholars. Like we have here, Jones 2006 claims that web-based writing instruction helps develop students' writing skills. Notice here that this is actually the result of Jones' study about using web-based instruction to develop writing skills. Again, those are the three types of evidence that you can use or for logical appeal. And the second one is ethics. How can you support your argument using ethical appeal? Ethics means an appeal to one's sense of right and wrong or good sense. This is your one way of establishing your credibility as a writer. So to establish your credibility as a writer, you need to make sure that all the information that you're gathering are from credible sources. And the third type of evidence that you can use for your argumentative essay is pathos or emotions. So this is an emotional appeal, an appeal to one's patriotism, fears, or sympathies. So this is an example of an emotional appeal. You can cite a situation which is relevant to your topic. While I was visiting my preschoolers living in a squatters area, I couldn't help but be touched by the deplorable conditions of these children. Most of their houses is very small, dark, and stinking because of the faulty drainage beside their houses. In a small dark room of about 16 square meters live six people. So this is an emotional appeal. This is a situation of preschoolers living in the squatters area. You have to touch the reader's emotions by providing or narrating a situation that will affect them emotionally, so that they can also think on how they can be of help to the government's problem or the country's problem. So here is the second organizational structure which you can use as a writer. First, you have to introduce the issue by presenting the thesis statement. You can also talk about the background information. You start with the con arguments. Earlier, you noticed that we start with the pro arguments, the advantages of solar energy. So this time, we start with the con arguments and reputations, refutation of the counter arguments, followed by the arguments, and the last one is the conclusion. So here is a sample issue for pattern B, or should the city expand and change its public transportation services? The thesis statement following the although because format is this. Although this city has a bus system and the bus fare for students is free, this city needs to expand and change its public transportation system because that will better serve the students. And for the introduction, statement of the controversy plus the statement, you can do that. For the counter argument, you have the cost and use issues like this. There's no reason to think that expanded service will charge students a fee, so that even if students pay a small fare, the expanded service will make the fare worth it. And the third one is more students will ride the buses if they run more often and on time, especially with additional publicity about the changes. So there. So if there is a change in the system, then of course there is a corresponding fee. And these are the reasons for the these are the refutations of for the counter argument. And for the pro argument one, limited service makes it difficult to go anywhere. That's pro argument one. Pro argument two, limited and often inaccurate time poses many problems for students, especially those with night classes. There. And for the conclusion, there should the recommendation of a solution to the problem and a prediction of what's going to happen if the improvements are not made. So there. Okay. So that's for pattern B. And for the organizational structure 3 or C, we have the this outline. Again, you have the introduction, background paragraph. Start with the counter argument 1 plus pro argument 1 to refute it. So it starts with the counter argument, and then you put it side by side with the pro argument. So second counter argument, and then ref, refute it. So you have the pro argument 2, and then current argument 3, then refute it with your pro argument 3. So we'll have a sample here. Question: is selected harvesting beneficial for forest? So it's good that you lay down all the pros and cons for this issue so that it will be easier to argue. Like here, in harvesting trees is healthy for the environment. For the con, cutting trees is harmful to the environment. That is the con. Increase it for the pro, it increases productivity, but for the con, it destroys natural resources. Deforestation solved problems. When forests destroyed, they are already ugly, correct? And it will cause erosion and landslides. For number 3, appropriate management allows total forest land to remain stable. So if you cut trees and you replace the trees, then the forest will remain stable. and you need to preserve forests naturally. That's for the con. So let's put that in the form of an outline. Oh, rather, there's still number 4. Forests are renewable, but for the counter argument, no. And there are other pro arguments like timber is this indispensable material for modern life. Timber industry provides jobs. So here is the thesis statement for that topic. Although preservationists believe that cutting trees harms the environment by destroying valuable natural resources, conservationists and forest managers believe that selective harvesting is actually good for forests and for people because it increases productivity and provides jobs and timber. So for the outline, you have the basic controversy explained, plus thesis statement, then the background information. You have to define selective harvesting and appropriate management. You provide history of the problem, like what is healthy harvesting versus destruction of the forest. And for the counter argument 1 and pro argument 1, forests are destroyed. But the counter argument for that is, oh no, not with good management. Then reforestation makes forest renewable. If you are able to provide good management in doing reforestation, then it will not it will be a good, it will be good for the environment. Okay, next, counter argument 2, pro causes of erosion and landslides. Knowledgeable for forest management, harvest carefully, and selective cutting prevents problems. There you go. So as you know, well, if you cut trees, then it may cause erosion and landslides. However, if you just harvest trees, or you cut trees carefully, so this is what we call selective cutting, then it will prevent soil erosion and landslide. Counter argument 3 and pro argument 3. From the for those who are not in favor of selective harvesting, so for them, even if you just cut trees that you select, no, it will still destroy natural resources. But for the pro arguments, it says here that you need to cut trees. Why? Because, well, these trees produce lumber, which are important for modern life. You use logs, no, you use timber for the industry, and it provides jobs. And for the current counter argument 4, it's although it's harmful to the environment, however, with good management, it will help the forest and it will increase productivity. When you cut a tree, you plant a replacement. So that's the solution. And for the conclusion, you need to provide the limitations and standards for harvesting trees, and you have to use appropriate forest management so that everyone benefits. And it's from Shinshuki Yamasaki, Japan. And let's try to analyze the necessity of the necessity of Korean foreign language education for Korean American children. So we'll analyze this argumentative essay from a Korean writer. By the way, it uses organizational pattern C. Notice this first paragraph. Many Korean permanent residents in the US face a serious problem: children who do not speak their native language. While these immigrants feel relieved from their hard lives, the speed of their English proficiency is low, like a turtle's pace. In contrast, that of their children is as fast as a rabbit. At the same time, the necessity of Korean language education becomes controversial. Some parents don't want their children to learn Korean. They want their children only to learn English. In my opinion, Korean language education not only promotes the development of children, but also brings domestic peace, which is a common aim of immigrant homes. Furthermore, Korean language education helps children understand the culture of their ancestors. The last sentence of the paragraph is the thesis statement. The previous sentences represent the background information for the issue. So let's focus now on the arguments presented by the writer. So this is the con argument. So some parents insist that they need not teach the Korean language to their children. Their opinion is that if their children learn two languages at the same time, they will have low language ability because they will divide that ability. So this is the con argument, the disadvantage of making their children learn English and Korean at the same time. But however, the counter argument is this: we have nothing to worry. So this pro argument, we have nothing to worry about on that point. According to educational research, children who learn two or more languages at the same time can improve their thinking faculties and their creative abilities. So from this order. For example, in Canada, children who spoke only English learned their school subjects in French in elementary school. The results were that these children not only could speak French efficiently after 2 or 3 years, but also have increased creative power, more sophisticated thinking faculties, and greater adaptability and intellectuality than other children who spoke only one language from Baker. Therefore, children who learn both Korean and English may be better, not worse students. So the writer is pro English, meaning teaching English to the Korean children, side by side with Korean language, and you have the the pieces of evidence provided are taken from experts' testimony, so from the products of their research. Next, other parents refuse to teach Korean to their children because the children are unwilling to study and learn. Consequently, family problems occur when the parents insist that their children learn Korean. In contrast, however, Korean language can be positively related to domestic peace. So that's the second argument. No? First, children tend to adapt themselves to American culture and to learn the English language quickly and easily, but their parents often have difficulty expressing their thoughts in English freely. If the parents cannot understand English well and the children cannot understand Korean, a generation gap occurs. This gap can become wider and wider each day, and finally, it will bring about family troubles. If the communication between the parents and the children is poor because of the language, children virtually live in a world different from their parents. To prevent their children being lost from them, parents should insist on teaching the Korean language to their children. So, again, the contention here of the parents, they want their children to learn English only, but for the writer, um, he insists that, children should learn how to speak Korean language, not only English, because if not, then these children will have a communication gap perhaps because the parents cannot understand English, they only understand Korean, so it will create domestic problem. So it's better to train their children to speak Korean so that they can relate to them. And the third, which is the strongest argument against teaching children Korean, is that many Koreans immigrant parents think that their children should become Americans as quickly as possible. Therefore, they refuse to interfere with the assimilation process by teaching the children the language and culture of Korea. This is a serious mistake. Koreans are a minority in the US, so keeping in touch with their culture and ancestors is especially necessary in order to keep their pride and security. While assimilation of the new culture is good, keeping the old culture is just as important. According to Schechter and Bailey, 1997, someday the children will ask themselves where they came from. They will have need to know about their culture. To understand that culture, they must learn their native tongue because the language is an important element that forms spiritual values and racial consciousness. So this is the most important argument, which is it's also the strongest argument because native tongue is actually one way of getting in touch, with one's culture and identity. So depriving children of knowing their first language will deprive them of their culture, so of their identity as a people. So there. And this is the conclusion part. In conclusion, Korean language education is desirable for the children themselves as well as for their parents. What is most important is that a language is not only a means of communication, but also a link to the mind and the soul of the culture. Therefore, Korean language education in immigrant homes is important. It should be required. So, this is a call for action or recommendation that the writer is expressing to his readers. It says here that teaching Korean is really very important because it is the link to the mind and the soul of the culture. I hope this lesson is clear for everyone.